You have already been manipulated today. You just did not know it. That is not an accusation. That is a diagnosis. And the terrifying part is not that someone deceived you. It is that you were conditioned from childhood to ignore every single signal your brain was trying to send you. You were taught to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to assume good intentions. And that conditioning, that beautiful, civilized, socially approved blindness, is the exact weapon your enemies use against you every single day. The lie they fed you is this: manipulation is obvious. It looks like a con man in a trench coat. It sounds like flattery you can smell from a distance. It announces itself. So you learn to look for the dramatic, the theatrical, the villain with a motive you can see. But real manipulation is quiet. It is patient. It wears the face of someone you trust. And by the time you feel it, you have already lost 3 moves ago. The FBI knows this. They're behavioral analysts, the ones who study deception for a living, who sit across from killers and spies and people who have rehearsed their lies for years. They developed a framework so precise, so psychologically ruthless, that it does not rely on gut feeling. It does not ask you to trust your instincts. It asks you to read the architecture of a person's behavior like a blueprint, to see what they cannot hide, even when they believe they are hiding everything. There are 5 specific things they trained their agents to detect, and the 5th one will explain every relationship that has ever made you feel insane. If you are not ready for this, if you still believe people are fundamentally good and that those who love you would never play you, close this. Go back to the crowd. But if you are done being blind, stay. Your trust is not a virtue. It is a liability you have not yet learned to manage. The average man believes trust is the foundation of every relationship. He was taught this in school, reinforced by every film and religion and self-help book that ever colonized his mind. The result? He hands over his trust like it is worthless, because he was never taught it has a price. You were brainwashed to believe that withholding trust makes you cold, broken, damaged. That healthy people trust freely and suspicion is a trauma response. That is not psychology. That is social control designed to keep you manageable. Machiavelli understood something that modern society spent 500 years trying to bury. He wrote in The Prince, "Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." Read that again. He who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. You are not being victimized by clever people. You are participating in your own deception by refusing to develop the tools to see clearly. Joe Navarro, FBI counterintelligence agent, behavioral analyst, author of What Everybody is Saying, built his career on one foundational principle: the limbic brain cannot lie. The conscious mind constructs the story, but the body, the autonomic nervous system, the involuntary micro-responses, those leak the truth constantly. Every person manipulating you is leaving fingerprints on the air. You were never taught to read them. The first thing Navarro's framework demands is this: establish a behavioral baseline before you attempt to detect deception. Watch how someone moves, speaks, breathes, and holds their body when they are comfortable, relaxed, in a normal conversation about nothing important. That is their baseline. Every deviation from that baseline under pressure is data, not proof, data. The manipulation detector does not convict on instinct. It collects. Julius Caesar ignored the baseline. He knew the senators were nervous. He felt the shift in the room. He dismissed it as superstition, as weakness, as the kind of fear he had no patience for. On the Ides of March, he paid for that dismissal with 23 stab wounds. Do not be Caesar. Be the one reading the room Caesar refused to read. Your first instruction? For the next 7 days, before any high-stakes conversation, spend 60 seconds observing the other person in a low-stakes moment. Watch how they move when nothing is at risk. Bank that data. You are building a map. The manipulation will show itself as a deviation from that map. Because the second revelation is where most people's entire social world collapses. Manipulators do not lie to you. They tell you incomplete truths and let your imagination build the cage. The 99% believe that catching a manipulator means catching a lie. They are looking for the moment someone says something provably false. And so the skilled manipulator never says something provably false. They omit. They redirect. They answer a different question than the one you asked. They volunteer information that floods your attention while something critical disappears beneath the surface. Robert Greene identified this in the 48 Laws of Power as the architecture of misdirection, the deliberate use of selective truth to construct false reality. Law 3. Conceal your intentions. The master player never tells you what they are doing. They give you enough truth to feel informed and enough omission to remain completely blind. This is what the FBI calls the deceptive narrative cluster. A single omission proves nothing, but when someone consistently redirects, consistently fails to confirm or deny, consistently changes the subject with warmth and humor right at the critical moment, that is a pattern. Patterns are architecture, and every architecture reveals who built it. Cardinal Richelieu built an entire political empire on this principle. He never lied outright to the French nobility. He simply never told them everything. He parceled out information like a currency, giving each faction just enough to believe they were valued, while holding back the one piece that would have let them see the complete picture. By the time anyone realized what he was doing, he was untouchable. They were already inside the cage he had built with their own beliefs. The practical instruction is surgical. When someone answers your question with a question, or responds to your concern with warmth instead of information, pause. Do not fill the silence. Do not soften the demand. Look at them. Hold the quiet for 5 full seconds. Say nothing. The manipulator's limbic system will respond to that silence with a pacifying behavior, a touch to the neck, a sudden laugh, a pivot to flattery. You are not waiting for them to speak. You are watching what their body says before they decide what words to use. Because what comes next is the one that will make you question every person you have called loyal. The most dangerous manipulation you will ever face comes disguised as love. The average man protects himself against strangers. He is vigilant at the gate, suspicious of new arrivals, alert to the unfamiliar. But he leaves the interior completely unguarded because he was taught that intimacy means safety, that familiarity earns immunity, that the people closest to you have earned the right to operate without scrutiny. That belief is a fortress with no back wall. Psychologists call this coercive control, a systematic pattern identified by Evan Stark in his research on intimate manipulation, in which control is maintained not through overt threats, but through the gradual erosion of the target's independent perception of reality. It does not feel like manipulation. It feels like love, concern, guidance, protection. And it is executed most effectively by people who genuinely believe they are not doing it. The most dangerous manipulator is the one who has convinced themselves they are the victim. The FBI behavioral profile for this pattern includes 3 consistent markers: isolation, reducing your contact with external perspectives that might contradict the narrative; intermittent reinforcement, alternating warmth and withdrawal to create emotional dependency; and narrative ownership, consistently rewriting shared history so that your memory of events is replaced by their version. You are still here. Good. The fragile ones already left. Napoleon understood intermittent reinforcement intuitively. He applied it not to enemies, but to his own generals. He dispensed favor and fury in unpredictable cycles, ensuring that every man in his inner circle spent more mental energy managing his emotional state than strategizing independently. His generals were brilliant, but they were also hooked. Their loyalty was not to France. It was to the variable reward schedule of Napoleon's approval. He did not build an army. He built an addiction. Your instruction: identify the last 3 times you changed your behavior, your plan, or your belief because someone close to you expressed disappointment or withdrawal. Not argument, not evidence, but emotional temperature. Map those moments. If you see a pattern, you are not in a relationship, you are in a system. And the system is not yours. The tell that exposes everything is not what they say. It is the distance between their words and their interest in your response. A sincere person wants to know if you believe them. Watch for that need. Watch for the moment after someone tells you something. Do they lean in? Do they hold your gaze? Do they wait with any genuine hunger for your reaction? Or do they deliver the statement and immediately move forward, as if your reaction is irrelevant, as if the goal was delivery, not truth? Behavioral analysts call this evaluative gaze, the natural, involuntary behavior of someone who has spoken honestly and wants confirmation. It is one of the most consistent signals in the human behavioral catalog. Liars have already decided the outcome of the conversation before it begins. They are not waiting for your reaction. They are monitoring whether their script is working. Robert Greene writes in the 33 Strategies of War that the most powerful move is to force the enemy to react to your moves, never the reverse. A manipulator is always the one moving. You are always the one reacting. The moment you understand that the emotional chaos around you is not organic, that it is orchestrated, that you are being managed, the game changes permanently. Cosimo de' Medici ran Florence for decades without ever holding formal power. He never needed to. He read every room he entered with the precision of a man who had trained himself to see human behavior as a system rather than a feeling. He watched for the evaluative gaze. He watched for consistency between a man's interest in being believed and his actual behavior in private. He funded artists and scholars and clergy not out of generosity, but out of strategic intelligence, because a man who owes you his career will tell you the truth about what others are doing. Information was his empire. The ability to detect deception in real time was his throne. Your instruction: in your next significant conversation, after the other person makes a strong claim, stop. Say nothing. Give them silence. A sincere person fills that silence with elaboration, with evidence, with the natural overflow of someone who believes what they are saying. A manipulator fills it with redirection, with a question, with a sudden change of subject, or with pressure disguised as warmth. You are not judging. You are watching. Comment below. I read the architecture. The reason you keep missing it is not that you are unintelligent. It is that you are emotionally invested in not seeing it. This is the one no one tells you. Not the FBI trainers, not the psychology professors, not Robert Greene. This is the part that lives beneath every framework and every technique and every revelation in this video. You already know. You have known for longer than you are willing to admit. There is a version of you, cold, precise, completely honest with itself, that saw the pattern 6 months ago, a year ago, maybe longer. And a warmer, more frightened version of you overrode it, because seeing clearly meant losing something, and you were not ready to lose it yet. The psychological term is motivated cognition, identified by Ziva Kunda in her foundational research on how humans process evidence. We do not evaluate information objectively. We evaluate it in the direction that protects the outcome we are already committed to. You are not being fooled by manipulators. You are being held in place by your own refusal to tolerate the cost of clarity. The FBI does not have this problem, because FBI agents are trained to remove emotional investment from the analysis. They are trained to treat the person across the table as a behavioral system, not a relationship. And they are trained to trust the data more than they trust their hope. You have been given the data. You have always had the data. The question is whether you are now willing to trust it more than you trust your need for the relationship to be what you want it to be. There is no version of this path that is comfortable. Understanding manipulation at this level, seeing the architecture, reading the baseline, stripping the emotional noise from the behavioral data, it makes you permanently different. You cannot unknow this. You cannot go back to trusting the warmth without also seeing what the warmth is doing. And that is a particular kind of loneliness that the crowd will never understand. Because the crowd has agreed, collectively, not to look too closely. The wolf does not have the comfort of the flock. The man who sees clearly does not have the comfort of consensus. You will be called cold. You will be called paranoid. You will lose relationships that were built on your blindness because they could only survive your blindness. Machiavelli wrote The Prince while stripped of power, tortured, in exile outside Florence, the city he had served for 14 years. He had been removed, humiliated, broken. And in that exile, with nothing left to protect and no audience left to perform for, he wrote the most honest political document in the history of Western civilization. Not because he was free, but because he had nothing left to lose by seeing clearly. That clarity is the only freedom that cannot be taken from you. It is cold. It is isolating. It costs more than most people are willing to pay. But it is the only freedom that is truly yours. You made it to the end. That already separates you from the overwhelming majority of people who clicked away when this became uncomfortable. You are not the average man. You never were. The average man does not search for this kind of knowledge. He does not sit with discomfort for 15 minutes while his beliefs are surgically dismantled. He does not take notes in his mind about people he trusts. He does not ask hard questions about himself. You do, which means you have a responsibility to keep going. Subscribe, not because I asked you to. Subscribe because you have decided somewhere in the last 15 minutes that you are done being managed, that you are done handing your perception to people who have an interest in shaping it, that you would rather live in cold clarity than warm illusion. And if you want what I cannot say in a video that the algorithm allows to exist, the deeper material, the frameworks I keep behind closed doors, you know where to find it. The door is open, but only for people who already know they are ready.